there. Being able to analyze the image in that way. In this case, it's just not going to work out all that well. Fortunately, it's remarkably easy to fix. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Could you clone stamp? Sure, but I would recommend getting a square or rectangular brush in this case. We're just going to copy pixels. So we've already seen how we have the spot healing brush tool, for example, where we can say, hey, Photoshop, clean this up, and Photoshop looks somewhere else for pixels to put in that area. But we also saw with the patch tool, for example, where we can make a selection and then go say, take this area and put it in here and blend it. But in this case, I don't want it to blend. So I want something that's more like the clone stamp tool that will simply copy pixels from one area to another without altering them, but that lets me work based on a selection. There's no such tool, so it can't be done. But we're going to do it anyway. We're not going to let impossibility stop us. In this case, I'm actually just going to use the rectangular marquee tool. Does it look to you like that'll work out just fine? And never was there a better case for the rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to create a selection of the area that I want to clean up. But, and this is important, I'm going to make sure that that selection is quite a bit larger than what I actually need so that it will allow for some blending, just in case some areas don't quite line up, etc. All right, so I'm going to select more than I need. Then, let me zoom out just a notch here. I'm going to take this selection and move it somewhere else because I don't want to copy the busted window. I want to copy a good window and put it in place of the busted window. And so with any selection tool active and with the new selection option active, I want to make sure I'm not adding to, subtracting from, or intersecting with the selection. But with that new selection option active, I can click inside the selection and drag to move the selection. I'm not moving the image, I'm just moving the selection. So in this case, moving the selection into a position that represents a good source of pixels to copy from. Then I want to make a new layer. But not just any layer. I want to copy those pixels onto a new layer. I can go to the Layer menu and then choose New and then Layer via Copy. I could also press Control-J on Windows, Command-J on Macintosh. We already talked about that in the context of duplicating the background image layer, but if we have a selection active, then that Control-J or Command-J will only copy the selected pixels. All right? So Layer New, Layer via Copy, or Control-J on Windows, Command-J on Macintosh. And now I have a new layer that contains only a window. In fact, I'm going to rename that layer to Window. And then I'll use the Move tool to drag it down. Now normally, I would be able to drag down in a perfectly straight line with the mouse, no problem at all. Sometimes you guys make me a little nervous, especially with the spotlights on and everything, and so my hand gets a little jittery. So instead, I'm going to make sure that I don't move it left or right by only moving it up and down, in this case down, using the arrow keys on the keyboard. I can, again, hold that Shift key if I want to move it by big chunks at a time, or I can fine-tune it with just the up or down arrow keys. How's that look? Pardon me? Can you clean your windows like that? Yeah, I wish it were that easy.
Yeah, the bricks don't line up right.
The bricks don't. Everybody's always nitpicking. I can never get away with anything.
I just want to ask.
Yeah, the bricks aren't lined up right. And actually, if we look closely, I think we'll find. Actually, it looks pretty. Here's a little. See how it's just a little bit off, just enough that you can see. Now, you're probably never going to notice that, even if you print the image. Here, we have a little bit of that plywood shining through right there. Remember, because we copied and my selection went down into the plywood, so I have just a tiny little sliver of some of that plywood, which teaches us the lesson yet again. It's always better to zoom out than to zoom in, especially when your self-esteem is involved. But how would we fix it? Actually, you know, it's so good now I forgot which window it is.
Oh, the second one up.
Yeah, you can see where the bricks don't line up especially. That's a more obvious thing. Well, really in this case, let me turn off my window layer so that we can see the before version. For the most part, all I really need is the area of the plywood to be covered with glass. I might not even need the window frame itself. But let's go ahead and just blend it in. What I'm going to do is add a layer mask to my window layer. So I'm going to click on that circle inside of a square button to add a layer mask to my window layer. And that'll just add another thumbnail filled with white. It's just sitting there doing nothing. But we're going to make it do something. I'm going to choose my brush tool, and I'm using a soft edge brush, and I'm going to zoom in really close here so we can see where the bricks don't line up right here. See that stripe? Can you guys see that? Well, we can actually cut all the way into about here, right? We can go all the way to the edge of the window pane if we need to. Because I'm using a soft edge brush, we'll get a little bit of blending into that area. So I'll reduce the size of the brush here just a little bit. And as I paint with black, so I'll press the letter D on the keyboard to get my default colors, and then the letter X as needed to exchange foreground and background colors so that black is my foreground color. And effectively what I'll be doing is erasing pixels in a non-destructive way. I'm really just blocking pixels, black blocks and white reveals. So let's take a look at just the window layer. I've turned off the visibility for my background image layer, and I can just erase pixels. And probably I'll end up coming in something like this, right? Does that seem about right to you guys? And up here, maybe something like that, give or take. I'll go ahead and turn on the background image layer now, and let's scroll down. And you can see here's where we've applied the correction, that layer mask, and here's where we have not yet. So you can see where we start to see the bricks, and now I just erase the bricks. Something like that. And then up here looks like, actually we probably don't even need any blending, but what the heck, we'll blend it anyway. And over here there was just the tiniest little indication of an area where we could see some of that harsh transition. Down here, remember, can you see that color? So that's that plywood showing through from my original, so I'll get rid of all of that. So once again, turning off that background image layer, checking for any areas that I missed, things like this. These are the sorts of things that there's a good chance you'd never notice it in the print, but why take a chance? So I would just continue kind of getting that all blended. I think here I came a little too close into the window. You can see I've cut into the window essentially. So I'll just press the X to get white as my foreground color, and I can then basically just unerase like that. We'll zoom out just a hair here. And what do you say? I defy you to find a window installer who could have done a better job. Granted, it's a fake job. What do you say? Not bad. It's like I never